Well, hello. It's PCL Live again. If it's Monday, 1:30 Eastern, it's Purpose Center Leadership Live. So I'm going to give everyone a few minutes to log on and to tell me where you are dialing in from or watching from in the comments. Let me just see um, if we are showing up live as yet. Let's see here. I'm always checking on my phone to see if the broadcast is live. And I know it should be. Let's see. Yep. Okay, so in the comments, just drop where you are calling in from, dialing in from. I'd love to know. Today we're talking about culture. I know we talk a lot about corporate culture, but I want to do a little bit of a spin today on the hybrid culture. And so, hey, Mohammed. Hey, Jessica, Forest Park. Good to see you here. I'll give it a few more seconds, maybe a minute, and then we're going to talk about how leaders miss the clues on culture, especially nowadays in the post-pandemic, mid-pandemic era. Hi, Jacinth. Hi, Craig. Hi, Jean. Hi, Marianne. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a supporter of our show. And I hope you guys have questions today. Hi, Fareed. Hi, Penny. Good to have you guys here. So today we're going to talk about, culture, corporate culture. And I'll wait one more second and then I will get us started. Okay, so as you guys know, I'm doing the top 10 mistakes that leaders make, right? And so we've been talking about the mistakes that leaders make. And today's issue is on missing the clues of corporate culture. So many times people ask, right, what is corporate culture? It's very simple. It's defined pretty much as the way we do things around here, right? So if you're a leader, that's how it's defined. It's the way we do things around here. Around here meaning around here in the workplace. And if you are an employee from that perspective, it's the way the leaders, it's where the company does things, right? So that's what a corporate culture is. And it's based usually on the leader's values, right? The leader's belief system and the leader's values. But culture has been changing, especially in the last year. And if it hasn't been changing in your company, it should be. And I'm going to tell you why. So just to give you a hint of culture, right? And as to whether or not you fit into your culture. Have you ever felt like you just don't fit in the group you work with? That's a question. Do you ever feel that your coworkers just don't share your values? If you were in charge, would you change your organization significantly? So these are questions that you can ask yourselves, right? To know if you are at the right company, you're in the right culture. If you don't feel like you fit, if you feel like, you would do things differently if you were in charge, it could simply mean that you are not placed in the right culture. If you're a married person, right, or if you're involved with someone else, you may notice that the way how your family does things and the way how their family does things could be different, right? It's because your family has a culture of doing things a certain way, right? Based on your family's beliefs, background, ethnicity, or whatever. And it may be different from somebody else's family, right? Your significant other's family. It's the same way it is when you go from one company to the next, right? So for the leader is in charge of creating the culture. And for you, the employee, you have to find a place, right, that the culture aligns with your own value system. So a couple of things that have been shifting recently is this whole aspect of hybrid working, right? The hybrid workplace. So culture used to be, remember now, is how we do things around here, meaning a physical location. So how do we work with culture now when we are in different locations? We're at home, like I work from home, right? So if I was working for an organization, there are going to be some people actually at work in the office, and there's going to be some people like myself at home here. So, how then does culture work? This has been the question and the shift that had to start happening last year. So, I'm going to actually put a link to an article here, and I'll see if we can put the link in um, in the comments later on. It's an article from Forbes, right? The kind of workplace culture people won't leave and how to build it. It's a great article. And it was talking about how, as organizations start bringing people back to work, leaders are embracing the truth that company culture is about people, not location. So, this is a wake up call for leaders, right? So, they have to rethink their definition of culture. So, culture is no longer how we do things here in the office, is how we do things, period, and what do we believe. So, there are some major shifts happening. For example, one of the major shifts that are happening is that leaders have to begin to think that you don't have to be actually be present, right, to be part of the culture. Another shift that's happening is people are leaders who traditionally judge you on getting to work early or leaving work late. They're having to shift, and that used to be very valuable in certain companies. I remember when I was coming up as a young person in the workplace, I was told that the culture of where I worked at the time, if you could just get in a little earlier and then stay a little later, right? This is back in the 80s now, then you would be perceived as really valuable, right? That was a culture there. So the culture nowadays is changing. The culture nowadays is based on productivity because there's no way to monitor remote workers as to what time they're logging in, what time they're logging off. Because I could log in to my computer, but I'm not there, right? So the culture in organizations is changing now to where, okay, it's being based on the model of, well, we're going to base it on how much do you produce? Can you get the job done? If I can get the job done in 35 hours or in 30 hours, over 40 hours, then the culture is now get the job done. I remember a long time ago, even in the brick and mortar business, right? When I had my brick and mortar business years ago, I remember someone saying to me that employees are paid for 40 hours a week, right? But truthfully, they work 30 hours a week, maybe, if so much, because of the chit chatting, of the water cooler, of the walking around, of the coffee breaks, etc., etc., etc. But leaders felt comfortable when they knew they had you there for 40 hours or 45 hours. But now we are switching to a performance based culture. And if a company can switch to that, then they're going to be left behind because the days of pressuring people to come to work, to be into a physical environment, we have passed that, right? So let's see. Thank you, Jacinta. It's my pleasure. Okay, so there's another thing at play here. Today's culture in the hybrid workplace is now based on trust, right? Trust. The leader has to trust you, the employee, right? And you honestly, as an employee, you have to actually earn that trust. But the leader has to trust you, the employee, to have integrity, right? So they're trusting you to work remote, but you have to have that integrity. And so I think it's a two-way street here, right? I know employees love flexibility. They do. But there's a part that employees have to play as well. If I'm going to trust you, if you're working for me, I have remote workers, right? So if I'm going to trust you to work remote, right? I'm trusting you to do your work with integrity, to not share my data with anyone, to not, pass on company information to anyone because I can't see, not to email our stuff to anyone outside of the company. So there's a lot of trust involved, when we allow people to work remotely because we have less control, right? There's less control. You may be attached to a company's server, but without a supervisor there watching, right? You could share the trade secrets, right? So the trust is both ways. I have to trust you as the leader to be at home and to work with integrity and with intention, and you as the worker need to earn my trust. Let's see. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, you guys can dump them in the chat. So trust is a big thing. Fairness, trust and fairness, and it goes both ways, right? So as a leader, what's perceived as fair has really changed. It needs to be even more fair, right? And that's what happened with the COVID. We had to make allowances for moms with kids or single dads with kids. So there's a lot more fairness being built into the culture now. At the same time, employees, you cannot, take advantage of that fairness, right? So if you need allowances made on your behalf, great. Open communication, dialogue is important because from a leader's perspective, even for the hybrid worker, the worker who is working from home, I, as a leader, will know. I will know if you are being productive. I will know if you're being fair to the system. There's ways that we can know. So while the culture has to be a lot more flexible because of what happened in COVID, it's a partnership between the employee and the organization, the employee and the leader, right? Flexibility for those workers who are going back to work. What's being asked nowadays from workers who are actually going back to work, they want a similar flexibility to the workers who are staying home. So leaders who traditionally were very rigid as to what time you get to work, what time you leave work, they're being asked now to be a lot more flexible. So there's a lot of pressure on leadership and on organizations to keep the workers happy, right? And so it's almost like, I would say, it's a workers market at this point. It's an employees market at this point. But and even though the culture, this new culture that we're ushering in will most likely be the one for the future, I would want to caution employees not to take it for granted, right? Not to take it for granted. This could be a real win-win where we actually have real productivity. As a matter of fact, I embrace the culture that allows for autonomy, right? To workers who you trust. I embrace that culture because there's a lot of great and creative ideas that come from people who are given the autonomy to work. At the same time, I've also seen tremendous abuse from employees who have been given the opportunity to work from home. So let me know what you guys are seeing in the chat, right? Do you see the abuse at times from employees, some of your fellow workers? And are you in a company where your values are aligned with the company's culture? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. The next point that leaders have to get used to, we've already mentioned it. Being present, physically has been like a real, just a real standard, right? A real standard for organization. And so it's so different now you may belong, the leaders may have the same building with half the staff. And it's taking them a while to wrap their head around this divided workforce. So there's a lot of opportunities for those of you out there to retrain yourself, retrain your team, retrain your staff. There's also staff members who may choose to come to work, right? May choose to actually be in a physical location. And there's some who choose to be home. The staff member who has chosen to be at work should not be upset with the staff member who has chosen to stay at home. So there's a lot of opportunities right now for managers and leaders to retrain the team because we're in such a different place nowadays. Aubrey said, yes, trust is so important. Another thing I want to point out in this new culture, again, I want to know what you guys think at this point, but what happens if you as an employee are in a culture that doesn't work for you, you have 5 or 6 potential reactions, right? And so I'd like to hear your reactions. So if you're in a culture that's not, hi, Sean, good to see you. If you're in a culture that's not working for you, you have 5 or 6 responses that you can have, right? So you as an employee, you can adapt wholeheartedly and promote the culture enthusiastically. That of course is I would say the best way to do it. Number 2, you can adapt reluctantly and submit to the culture passively. So that's perhaps some people out here in the audience. Or you could reject the culture and try to change it. That may not get you too far if the culture has been a culture there forever, right? Because the culture starts at the top. So even if you don't like the culture, you can reject the culture, but you cannot get them to change it, right? That is a leader decision. That is a leadership decision because the culture is based on the leader and the founders, right? Do you know that the only person who can change a culture is if the leader leaves and a new leader comes in? That leader may most likely have a different set of values and may begin to change the culture. But you, as an employee, it's hard for you to change the culture. Okay. You can reject the culture and be a troublemaker while remaining miserable. Of course, I would advise against that, right? So if you're in an organization and it bothers you so much, right? You don't like the way they do things around here. You can reject the culture and be a troublemaker, which I've seen, and remain miserable. My advice to you, if you're in that spot, is to find another company, right, where the culture, suits you better. Even if you're getting a lot of money or a good salary, it makes no sense for you to be miserable while working, right? You can reject the culture and just leave, right? So, or you can reject the culture and make everyone miserable by trying to change it. So here's the message for you as an employee, right? When you're interviewing for a job, it is very important to find out as much information as you can about the culture of the organization, right? As Sean says here, if the culture doesn't match with your personal values, exit. I mean, really, why be miserable? What's the point? And I would say for employers, here's what I would say: when you are interviewing for positions, do your best. Ask clever questions to see if this person's values fits your value system in the organization. Because if it doesn't, hiring that person will not work out in the long run, right? Because they're probably not going to change their value system to match yours. So I think it's incumbent upon both parties to choose wisely, right? Especially nowadays, right? With everything that we've gone through, it's important to find a place where the chemistry works for you. And it's important for employers to find people whose chemistry work for the organization. It's just not worth it to be miserable, as Marianne said. It's not worth it at all. So what do you do, right? I would say staff training is very important, right? So how do you get the culture in the company's DNA, right? How do you get the culture in each employee's DNA, right? Training. So you as an employee has decided to be at this company, right? The employer's job is to train you, right, on culture, to go over with you what the value system is there in this organization. And I think the more we communicate and act out what the culture is the better for everyone. I believe so much in open communication, right? And truly, if the culture really doesn't fit you as an employee, really, as everyone's saying here in the comments, you should really leave, because it's simply just not worth it for you getting everyone else miserable, because that track record will track with you, especially nowadays with social media, right? It just takes one person making a bad post on your social media platform saying how awful you were to work with. I've seen these posts on people's social media. Terrible employee, right? Terrible employer. It's everyone's free spirited now, free wielding with their typewriter, with their keyboards, right? So it's up to you to watch your own brand, right? And if your brand doesn't fit into your organization's brand, then leave. There are many companies out there to choose from. There are companies that allows for entrepreneurship, right? Allows for autonomy. You can just take the time to find out what suits you as an employee. And employers, take the time to train culture, right? Because it is what it is. It's the way how you do things around here. Now, I want to say this one thing about employers, though, um, especially nowadays, right? Flexibility is going to be important because things have changed. And the way how you did things, how you operated the business prior to COVID, employers, it may be time to look at how you are conducting business. You must adapt to this new environment. Um, see what Sean says. Culture can be reduced to 5 easy words: how you treat your people. Absolutely. How you treat your people, really how you do things, how people feel when they're in your presence, right? How are people treated? How do they feel? So let's see what Marian says. Create a DDO, deliberately developmental organization. People love to learn. Creating that culture there's a positive environment. I do agree. I do agree that people love a learning culture. I think more and more companies should engage in that. I know for me, when I was, working for someone, I loved the opportunities that were given to me for personal development, right? For training, additional learning. And I learned from that as an employee. And when I became an employer, I created that same culture because it benefited me so much. People love to learn, they love to grow. Let's see. Flexibility, spot on. Let's see. Is anyone here on the feed working for an organization right now that you don't think you are a fit? I'd love to know. And what do you plan to do about it? Do you plan to reject it and be miserable, or do you plan to exit, or do you plan to accept it and try to promote it? I mean, it's your choice, right? It's your choice. Let's see. A culture derived from the philosophical basis of the leadership. An easy way to understand the culture is to ask leadership, what does it mean to be human? Sean, flesh that out. What does it mean to be human? If someone were to ask you that, Sean, what would you say? What does it mean to be human? One thing I do know is that there's a lot of talk about putting the human in human relations. I think this workforce nowadays, it's really, all about making people feel appreciated, right? Affirmed, encouraged, because it has been proven that when we make our people feel like they're being listened to, they're being heard, they're being affirmed, we're going to get much more out of them productivity wise than the old method of, we talk about dictatorship, which does not work anymore. Putting the human in human relationship is so important. And so I just want to remind everyone again, what I do. I'm a coach to executives and to leaders. I'm also a business consultant. I love working with organizations and helping them redefine culture, look at their communication system, redefine their strategies, and overall making their workplace a lot more productive, a lot more human, right? A lot more purpose centered. And so I will just remind you that to find me, the easiest place to find me is on my website, SharonGill.com. And that's it at the bottom right there, SharonGill.com. And so I'll take another few questions. If you guys have any questions or comments, I'll post them here on the feed. And then I will see you guys next week. But I'll take a few more, let's see, comments. The personal drives, Sean's my most avid commenter. The personal drives the professional. If the culture doesn't encourage the person to be the best version of themselves, they should exit. I think that's been the theme today, right? If you are an employee, and this could be for someone, right? They're at a crossroads, right? You're in this company, you're miserable. It pays well, but you're not growing. Your values don't align with the company's values. There's better out there, I promise you. There's better out there. Employees shouldn't try to conform to a culture that isn't them, but rather be transformed to a better version of themselves. there's better out there. It may even be time for you to start your own company, your own organization where you actually create your own culture. But do not, for heaven's sake, stay in an organization where you're miserable and now you're damaging your brand by being a surly and reluctant and a sabotager of the organization. So, see, I'll give one more second, and and then I'll bid you guys goodbye. If you're watching this on a replay, just hit hashtag replay, and I will continue to answer questions and continue to answer your feedback. But thank you once again for joining me here on PCL Live every Monday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And again, if you're looking to uplevel your own leadership game, if you're looking to uplevel your organization's game, please feel free to reach out SharonGill.com, contact at SharonGill.com. I'd love to talk to you for 30 minutes. All right, take care. And until I see you next week, God bless.